I want to bring up Gina and Stacy, who would like to honor Ferne today. Yes, you can clap.
All right, I just wanted to take this time to thank everyone so much for coming out and for being with us to honor Ferne. I hope that everyone here has enjoyed the film The Last Laugh as much as we did. I know that it moved me to tears multiple times. I've watched it a few times now, and I agree with everything that Kim said. I think that humor is incredibly important, especially in the political climate that we're in today. I think it's very relevant, and I thank Ferne for this film, because I think it is an incredibly, incredibly poignant piece. I don't know why I feel like crying right now, I'm sorry. I'm having a moment, I'm sorry. But that's a credit to you, so thank you for this piece. I don't know why I'm crying, I'm sorry. So if you could come up now, we'd love to present you with this award. Do you want me to hold that for you while you...
Sure. Well, thank you all for coming. You know, it's I'm so touched that you're so touched. It's very it's amazing to me that this award comes to me from the Rahway International Film Festival, because my very first film starred one of the sons of Rahway, Manny Yarbrough, who's no longer with us, sadly. But so it's a meaningful thing for me, and I just want to thank you all for having me here and honoring me. And of course, I want to thank my husband and partner who's here, Robert Edwards, who's my producer, and most of all, my parents who came all the way here, and I wouldn't be here without them. So thank you.
To open the floor with a quick Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for Ferne? Don't be shy. Yes, in the back.
So are you friends with fellow comedians?
Some.
How'd you get them to be a part of it?
You know, it wasn't easy, but Rob Reiner was the first to say yes, and he is such an incredible force, and he's so beloved that, and crosses so many age gaps, right? Because of his father, Carl Reiner, you know, and his connections to Mel Brooks and everybody. That it garnered so much respect, and of course he, you know, he is a hero to so many younger comedians. So he opened many, many doors for us. And then it was just like we sort of had to chip away. Some comedians were harder, like Mel Brooks was very hard. There were a certain amount of people we had to interview just to say we interviewed before we could even approach him. And, you know, some were just really willing to talk about it because it was a topic that was near and dear to their hearts. And so, you know, it ran the gamut.
Yes, right here in front.
Hi, I was wondering if you ever felt like you were walking the same line as some of the comics as you were making this film.
Well, you know, I tried to make this film since 1991, so I always knew that it was, you know, going to be pushing boundaries for people. It was going to be, you know, controversial. The irony is it got less controversial over time because, you know, as time passed, you know, people have been using satire more and more for difficult topics, and it's become more acceptable. You know, I really thought that if I made the film when I first tried, I probably would have had picketers and, you know, people, you know, getting hate. I would have received a lot of hate mail, and I didn't. And I think it's because, you know, as I've said before, my husband and I like to say we made a film about bad taste, but we hope we made it in good taste. And I think that people are surprised. And one of the biggest surprises for me was how open survivors have been and people in the Holocaust community, because this is a legitimate part of some people's story and a part of their story they don't usually get to tell. So the fact that they could tell these stories and not feel guilty about it. I was just in Montana a week ago with Renee, and when somebody asked, well, what did you think when she first approached you? And she said that it was, I'm not going to be able to quote her exactly, but she said something like, you know, people want to hear my story and they want to hear the stories of how inhumane it all was. And this was the first time somebody thought that there was humanity in it. And I was very moved by that.
Yes, right here.
About Renee, how you picked her as a survivor. Obviously, something about her lit up the screen. I mean, you just kind of, she had a smile to her even all the time, I felt like.
Yeah.
Even when, you know, obviously not fully when she was crying, but as a survivor, she lit up the screen and
Yeah.
felt that there was hope, you know.
Yeah, she's incredible. So when I first, you know, was working out this idea many years ago, and it started with a paper that a friend wrote based on an experience that we had had, and it was a very academic paper, you know, like collection of jokes from the camps and the ghettos and everything. And when he basically handed it to me and said, make this into a movie. And at that time, I knew I was going to open it up to post-war humor, because that wasn't in the paper. But I also knew that I didn't want to just make a documentary with talking heads and, you know, just interviews and feel like it was just a TV documentary. So I searched and searched and searched for many, many years, like, what was that observational story going to be? And it was a big struggle for me. And when Rob Reiner said yes, and we were based in New York and he was in LA, and I was shooting this in film, which made it a much more expensive, bigger production. I knew that when I went out to do that interview, I wanted to keep, you know, I wanted to, you know, make a week or two of, you know, stuff to shoot around it. And so I looked up people that I had researched over the years that were in LA, and one is the woman that she's sitting at that deli with, who wrote, "My parents went through the Holocaust and all I got out of it was this lousy T-shirt." So I called her, and immediately she said, "Of course I'll be in it." And she's like, and then she said to me, "Who else can I help you find?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking to speak to survivors who don't think it's okay to laugh, survivors who do think it's okay. And I also wanted to speak to the children of survivors, because there was this very dark sense of humor, very private, you know, that they keep to themselves, to not, more of a release, you know, of their experiences growing up as children of survivors. So they don't like to tell those jokes outside of their community because they don't want to, you know, make fun of their parents." So that was something I also wanted to do. And she said, "Oh, I have the perfect mother and daughter for you. The mother goes around the world speaking about the Holocaust. She's got an amazing sense of humor, and the daughter started second generation Los Angeles." And I spoke to them 15 minutes later, and I knew that was the story. I mean, I thought I would just do it. When I was asking, I was just looking for an interview. But when I talked to them, I knew she was my story.
Yes, right here.
Not a question, but just a couple of comments. I was really struck by the courage to show the two sides of issues. And at 61, I thought, and I've seen almost every film that's referenced here multiple times, but the juxtaposition of the controversy over life is beautiful was educational to me, and shocking and courageous of you to show that. And so I really admired that, because
Thank you.
We're talking about an Oscar winner, and that I personally love the film, but I was completely unaware of it being offensive to others.
Yeah.
And so that was really a light bulb turned on for me that way. The other comment I have is that I just think the relevancy of your film, the timing is what we need. And I think this your film has the potential to have a lot of power now.
Wow.
And even though it's about decades ago, the relevancy was shocking.
Wow. Thank you. I will say about Life is Beautiful, I always feel a little unfair about that, because in my research, I found that there are two groups of people that don't like that film: survivors and comedians. And those are the people in my movie. So, you know, I don't know if it's the end all, thoughts on that movie, but it just so happens it's the ones in my movie, you know.
Any last questions? Is that it?
I have have one more, just kind of bringing back to that, because you did interview the Anti-Defamation League. Was that originally in your plan to have that gentleman in it, like to show that other viewpoint?
It was definitely to show that other viewpoint. I was lucky that he agreed. He within 6 months after he was the first head of the, sorry, thank you. And he retired 6 months later. So I was very, very lucky because the film, I don't think really worked until we had his voice in it,
Well, you think of that organization as an important organization, but yet to hear that viewpoint of that movie, I was like, yeah, I never put my thoughts like that.
Yeah. Well, and his story is so personal and beautiful. I mean, the whole crew was crying as he told that story, I mean, there's like a longer version, and it's incredibly touching.
Yes, one more. Right.
As a storyteller, how do you decide where to put the transitions in between your interviews with the Holocaust survivor and her telling her story and her family, and then putting it in the right timing with the actors and comedians?
That's a good question. That's the hardest thing about this film, because basically I was taking two different films and trying to make them into one. And it didn't work until it worked, And there were doubters, I mean, the whole way. One of the last cuts we showed before we finally made it work, there were people that were like, take Renee out of the film. And so, of course, I knew that there's no film without Renee. But, it was just felt like two different films until I could make it work. And so that was the big struggle in the edit room. So hopefully it works now.
It sure does. If we can all give Ferne a nice round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you being here today.